Well, it's finally happened. What so many have feared, and honestly, what some have been waiting for, is here. The long shadow war between Iran, the United States, and Israel is over. Now, it's a full-blown invasion, and it all kicked off this morning. So today, we're going to break down exactly how we got to this point, what could happen next, and what this means for, well, for the entire world.
The first shots were fired just before dawn. Israeli missiles, in a very calculated, very precise first move, struck right at the heart of the Iranian regime. And look, this wasn't just a military strike on some airbase or weapons depot. This felt like a decapitation attempt targeting the homes of key leaders and their command centers. I mean, this was a clear signal that this isn't some limited skirmish. It's the start of a war to completely dismantle the power structure in Iran.
And just a little while after those first missiles landed, President Trump made it official. His words, they really echoed through history, didn't they? It's a direct and frankly chilling line straight back to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We are going to defeat this regime. It's a simple statement, right? But the implications, they are absolutely profound, setting the stage for what could be a conflict that defines a generation.
So what's the official reason for such a drastic move? Beyond the strong words, let's take a look at the actual stated goals and the long winding road that brought us to this very moment.
Okay, so the official objective here isn't just to contain Iran. It's to fundamentally change it. For years, there was this complex dance of sanctions and diplomacy, things like the Iran nuclear deal, all trying to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. But in the end, those efforts, well, they just didn't work long term. So from the White House's point of view, they had to make a really tough call. The regime itself is the problem, and so the regime must be removed.
And yeah, this didn't just happen overnight. For months, we've been seeing a massive military buildup. U.S. aircraft carriers, naval warships, they've all been gathering in the Middle East. It's this incredible force of overwhelming power, really, just sitting there, waiting for the green light. And today, that light turned green.
But what about Iran's response? Well, they didn't do what anyone expected. Instead of just lashing out directly at Israel, Tehran pulled off the strategic masterstroke that instantly made the battlefield a whole lot bigger.
As the world was kind of holding its breath, the biggest question was, how is Iran going to hit back? Everyone was guessing, and the most logical move seemed to be a direct, head-on missile attack against Israel, a classic tit-for-tat response. But Iran had a completely different strategy in mind, one that took advantage of its enemy's greatest strength, its global presence.
And here's the twist. Because the United States was an open partner in this attack, Iran's leadership decided to skip a direct fight with Israel. Instead, they chose to go after America's huge military footprint spread all across the Middle East.
And this just shows you the scale of their counterattack. In one coordinated wave, Iranian missiles slammed into U.S. military bases in Bahrain, the UAE, and Qatar. We're also getting unconfirmed reports about strikes on bases in Saudi Arabia. So this wasn't just a single shot back. It was a broad, sweeping assault on the entire American military setup in the region.
You see, this is a total game changer for Iran's military thinking. In the past, Iran and Israel have traded direct blows. But this time, Iran's playing a whole different game. Instead of a head-on fight they know they can't win, they're fighting a war on the edges, attacking the American support system that holds up both U.S. and Israeli military power.
And the consequences of this move? They're huge. By hitting U.S. bases in countries like Bahrain and Qatar, Iran has now dragged those nations into the fight, whether they want to be in it or not. This isn't a localized war between three countries anymore. The entire Middle East is now a battlefield, and the potential for total regional chaos is just immense.
But to really get what's happening today, you gotta look back. This conflict didn't just start this morning. Its roots go back almost 50 years, buried in this deep, deep legacy of animosity and mistrust.
The seeds for today's war were planted 47 years ago. Back in 1979, the Iranian Revolution didn't just overthrow a king. It overthrew a key American ally and put a religious government in charge that was fundamentally against the United States. And what came after that was just a series of events, from the U.S. backing Saddam Hussein in the bloody Iran-Iraq War to decades of sanctions that just built this unbreakable wall of hostility.
And if there's one single event that really cemented the hatred between these two countries, it was the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis. For 444 agonizing days, American diplomats were held captive in Tehran. It's an event President Trump actually brought up in his speech. It's this deep scar on the American psyche that is just never fully healed.
In his speech, Trump also spoke directly to the people of Iran. He called them very good people who are being held captive by a terrible regime, and he promised that once their leaders are gone, he'll hand control of the country right back to them so they can decide on their own democratic future.
But that raises a huge question, doesn't it? Does this sound familiar? This promise of getting rid of a dictator and handing power to the people? Well, we've heard it before. And history gives us a pretty stark warning from both Iraq and Afghanistan, where similar promises of a stable, democratic future proved to be incredibly difficult, if not, impossible to actually pull off.
All right, to understand the bigger picture here, we need to zoom out from the immediate fighting and look at the deep religious and strategic divides that basically define the entire Middle East.
You see, this fight isn't just about politics. It's also about religious split that goes back over 1,000 years. This ancient divide between Shia and Sunni Islam is a major fault line in the Middle East. Iran is the big Shia power in the region, while Saudi Arabia leads the Sunni countries. This rivalry has fueled proxy wars for decades, and the fact that there are U.S. military bases in almost all of the surrounding Sunni nations makes Iran feel strategically cornered.
So how does a country like Iran fight a superpower like the United States? Well, not with a conventional army it doesn't really have. They do it with shadows, with surrogates. Iran has become a master of proxy warfare, using other groups to fight its battles, to project its power, and to make its enemies bleed without ever risking a direct fight it knows it would lose.
This proxy network, which Iran actually calls its axis of resistance, is its #1 strategic weapon. By funding and arming groups like Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah up in Lebanon, and the Houthis down in Yemen, Iran has been able to wage a shadow war against both Israel and the U.S. for years, creating chaos and instability all over the region.
And what kicked this whole shadow war out into the open? The October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel. That moment was a massive turning point. It set off a systematic and really decisive campaign by Israel to take apart not just Hamas, but Iran's entire proxy network piece by piece, which set the stage for the direct fight we're seeing today.
Now, this war isn't happening in a bubble. The shockwaves are already being felt all around the world. And the great powers, I'm talking China, Russia, and India, are all being forced to make their next moves on this global chessboard.
So with the US and Israel launching a full-scale invasion, the obvious question is anyone going to come help Iran? Who are its allies on the world stage, and what are they actually willing to risk to get involved?
Iran's most powerful friends are Russia and China, but both of them are in a really tough spot. Russia is, well, they're bleeding money, equipment, and political goodwill in its war in Ukraine. They just don't have much to spare for a new conflict. And that leaves China, Iran's most important economic partner. China has the power to step in, but it would be a high-stakes gamble with its own future.
And this right here, this is China's Achilles heel. A huge chunk of its energy, the oil and gas that powers its entire economy, comes directly from the Middle East. If a pro-US government gets installed in Iran, Washington would suddenly have huge leverage over China's energy supply. For Beijing, that is a strategic nightmare.
But sending in troops is incredibly risky for China because of something called the Malacca Dilemma. See, most of its energy imports have to squeeze through the narrow Strait of Malacca, which is a naval choke point basically controlled by the U.S. Navy. A direct war could choke off China's economy. So while they're probably not going to send troops, expect Beijing to use immense diplomatic and economic pressure, and maybe even some covert support, to stop an American victory.
So while China's in a bind, another Asian giant, India, sees a historic opportunity rising from all this chaos. Let's talk about India's very calculated move here.
Okay, check this out. This is fascinating. Just 2 days before the invasion kicked off, India's Prime Minister Modi was in Israel, cementing the strategic alliance between the two countries. The timing? That was no coincidence. Intelligence agencies work in the shadows, and this was a very public, very pre-calculated visit that suggests India knew exactly what was about to happen.
India is playing the long game here by throwing its support so publicly behind Israel and the US at this exact moment. It's making a huge bet on a future where a friendly, pro-Western government in Iran opens up a whole world of economic and strategic opportunities that have been blocked for decades. And this shows you exactly what the prize is for India.
For years, India has been developing the Chabahar port in Iran. With a friendly regime in charge and U.S. sanctions gone, this port would finally let India bypass its arch-rival Pakistan and unlock a massive trade route to Afghanistan and the resource-rich countries of Central Asia. It is a geopolitical game-changer.
So, we've talked history, we've talked proxies, we've talked global politics. But what is the ultimate, non-negotiable reason for this entire war? What is the one threat that forced this final drastic action?
At the end of the day, it all comes down to this one thing. For both the United States and Israel, the absolute, non-negotiable red line is stopping the current Iranian regime from getting a nuclear weapon. Everything else, the proxies, the oil, the regional politics, it's all secondary to that one single existential goal.
And they have tried everything else. I mean, think about it. They used sophisticated cyber attacks like the Stuxnet virus to wreck centrifuges. They've used covert ops to take out key scientists. They spent years on painstaking diplomacy that led to the Iran nuclear deal. When all of that failed to stop the program for good, direct military action became the last and maybe inevitable option.
And if you want to understand why this is happening now, just look at North Korea. The U.S. is able to invade Iran precisely because it does not yet have a deliverable nuclear weapon. North Korea, which is also an enemy of the U.S., is safe from invasion because it does. For any regime, a nuclear bomb is the ultimate security blanket. And that is exactly why the U.S. and Israel decided they had to act now, before it was too late.
So where does this leave us? Is this just another chapter in the long, bloody history of the Middle East? Or is it something more? With the entire region now a battlefield and the great powers picking their sides, are we watching the opening shots of a new world war? The pieces are all there on the board. The only question now is, what happens?